Hey, hello, and welcome to the Let's Talk About Autism in Monglish podcast. You are my fourth episode for season 3. I can't even believe I'm saying that. I've had just the greatest honor and pleasure of meeting and talking to all these amazing Hmong women. And when I say that, I don't say that lightly. Like, of course, everyone that comes on my podcast, I'm so grateful and thankful. This podcast is even like tonight, I'm here able to do this because my husband is amazing and he took the kids away, right? And so he's a big contributor to why I can do what I do. And I was talking to him about the upcoming recording tonight, and I was telling him about you, Brittany. And I said, yeah, I met her through the North Carolina Hmong Women's Association. She's got her master's in public health and she's pursuing her doctorate right now. And he's like, wow, you know what you're really doing is you're able to highlight all these first and second generation Hmong women who are going out there and doing awesome things. I said, you know what? I really am. Like, unknowingly, I just am able to have been able to just, kind of stumble along all of you guys and just learn what you're doing. And I think, and I'm going down a rabbit hole before I've even done the introductions, but I think growing up, being at FFC, what do they always say, right? You gotta grow up and become a lawyer or a doctor, right? Like, that's it, one or two. And then I realize there's all these other avenues. And then as I'm thinking about what you do, I'm like, you know what? That is not one area that people talk about. And we need it so much, right? So, before you share with us more about what you do, I just want to give a warm welcome to Brittany Vang. Thank you for being on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me and for already giving me such like a generous intro. Honestly, I'm so excited that you are doing another season. Absolutely love your podcast and everything that it stands for. So thank you for having me here.
Oh, well, thank you. I keep thinking about like what are some topics that we haven't covered, and I'm kind of running out of ideas. But I love that people are kind of, as I'm encountering, individuals out there who are on their own, mission and their own passion projects, and seeing where we kind of align and say, yes, let's collaborate, let's talk more about what we can do together. So, I've had occupational therapists, speech pathologists, psychologists, psychiatrists, BCBAs, all the other professions, LCSWs on my show. But I'm so excited to share with Big and Home people. Today, I have Brittany, who is, like I said, you have your master's in public health, and then you're also now pursuing your doctorate. So please tell me a little bit more about you and your academic background and your future aspirations, Brittany.
Yeah, so to be honest, I actually started off as a pre-med, probably like hundreds of other Hmong people
I'm
going
raising my
into
hand. Yes.
yeah, going
Uh-huh.
into biology. So I
Yeah.
got my undergrad in cell biology and
Oh.
biotechnology. Yeah, and then after that, I actually got a job as a lab tech. Decided that I didn't really like lab work per se. It's super
Hmm.
important, but it just was not like me. It didn't feel like home.
Yeah.
So then COVID actually started, and I actually lost my job right before COVID, hit.
Hmm.
And in that moment, I just thought, well, what else can I do? So I
Yeah.
started like a side photography business because I was like really passionate about that.
Hmm.
And then I thought about, I guess, public health. The thing is, during my undergrad, we didn't have a public health department, but I was
Hmm.
always so intrigued by public health.
Right.
And so I decided, what the heck? I'm just going to go get my master's in public health. So that's
Yeah.
what I did. And I fell in love and I haven't looked back since.
Oh,
Yeah. And then so after I got my master's, I decided, for numerous reasons, that I'm going to pursue my doctorates in public health.
I'm so proud of you, and I'm so sorry. During our live this summer, I obviously I was like, I don't know very much about you and Lisa, and then I felt so terrible just because I really want to honor that in my fellow Hmong sisters, for taking that leap and really diving into finding, like you said, like what who you're all about and what your contribution is, right? And in public health. So I don't think that a lot of us really understand what that even means, y'all. To call, like I said, growing up, our parents were like, doctor or lawyer. And it's like, but there's other ways that we can contribute back into society, right? So tell me a little bit, like, what does one who works in public health or who has a degree in public health, what can they do? Or what do they do?
Yes. So public health, like you said, is not really well known. It is very broad. I will say
Mhm.
that. We can work in multiple spaces. So when people think of public health, they think of more like clinical aspect of it. And
Mhm.
the main difference between like public health versus like a dentist or a doctor or nurse is that we're not just treating like individuals, we're treating communities
Mhm.
per se. So we're looking at more of like a holistic um, approach to how can we help a certain population or community.
No, I
Uh,
love that.
yeah.
Yeah, and especially when it comes to, autism, right? This is the Let's Talk About Autism in English podcast, so it is very autism-centric, and, I just spoke with another individual about how right now, there's this big push. I mean, I don't wanna say big push, but there's a big information stuff out there where we're talking about autism, right? But Brittany, I don't know if it's enough, right? I don't know if, the stuff that we have been doing, the things that other clinicians doing, that, Hmong individuals, Hmong professionals are doing, if it's enough. And so when we talk about autism in the Hmong community, I mean, we're looking at like nationally, right? If honestly, for me, I'm looking at nationally, and just trying to see what we can do on that level. But I know that a lot of people talk about, oh, is it just rising now? Is it on the rise, amongst Asian people, amongst Hmong people? And the answer is no. The numbers have always been there. We just didn't have the data to support it, right? So I love that from the public health perspective. You're looking at a community, right? And so when you say community, are you talking like regional or like state, or are you looking at like nationally?
Right. So in public health, when we mean community, it could mean anything from like a state level to like
Hmm.
a local level, even
Hmm.
just like that county, or it can even mean like a certain ethnicity or race or maybe characteristic as far as like for an example, like the autism community that lives
Hmm.
within a certain region, or even like veterans per se.
Yeah, no, awesome. I love that answer. Um, I guess when we talk about autism in the Hmong community, then can you share with me about your connections to the autism diagnosis and what motivates you to advocate for autism awareness in the Hmong community?
Yeah, yeah. So my younger brother, who I love very much, well, I have two, but our my baby brother, I like to call
Hmm.
him. We're 19 years apart. He ended
Yeah,
up being yeah, so he ended up being tested for autism. So he's one of my biggest reasons why I want to advocate for autism awareness. I also have nephews and a few other family members who are also autistic. So they are my source of strength when it comes to advocating for autism awareness.
absolutely. And again, thank you guys so much for all your hard work this past April in putting together the first Hmong autism awareness event. And I think that I lived there for so many years, and then I left, and I going back through Hickory, it was like deja vu. It was like I this is so familiar, and yet knowing that the city, the town, the state has come such a long way, because when I lived there as a teen, nobody talked about autism in the Hmong community, right? Like nobody. I mean, I know that it existed, but like nobody was out there kind of like pushing information and helping parents feel like they were getting as much information as they would need, right? And if there was any information coming down from anybody, it was probably the schools. But as we talk about that word community, right? Sometimes you want to hear it from your own community, y'all. You want to hear it from your Hmong brothers, your Hmong sisters, your Hmong professionals, your Hmong families, people who are willing to have these really um, honest and genuine conversations about what's going on and how you can get help. And before we recorded this, we were talking about all the things going on right now in North Carolina. And I think as Hmong people, we can agree that we don't know how to ask for help, y'all. Like as Hmong people, we were raised, it's so ingrained in us to just what the and do it for yourself and don't ask anybody else. And so I just want to say I'm so proud of you and the work that you and the North Carolina Hmong Women Association has done for North Carolina and for women. But then especially these last few weeks after the hurricane in Western North Carolina, where we have a lot of Hmong communities and Hmong families. In fact, I'm from there, right, from little Colony Springs, Eichert area there in North Carolina, and so I know that's just right up the road from the Asheville area and the Morganton area. We have family there still. And like I was sharing with you, my sister and I, we called them. We were like, "Are you guys okay? Do you need anything?" And everyone's like, "Oh, we're fine. Jimmy Agile." And it's like, no, like, you haven't had power for a few days, you know? So like, what do you need? And so what are some things that you guys have seen that are needed in the community right now? And how have you guys been helping with the hurricane relief, especially for those families who have those with disabilities?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you so much for the recognition. Yeah, it's
Of
definitely
course.
been a collaborative effort. There's so many amazing people out here just getting together, people and organizations
Mhm,
getting together. But first, my heart does go out to everybody who was affected. It is quite devastating, and there's a long road to recovery, pretty much. But
yes.
um, basically what NCHWA is doing, and our fearless leader Sandra has been tirelessly leading our team into these recovery efforts. But
Mhm,
we've been working with partners to help bring in things like water, Asian food, and other needed items. And our drop off locations have been at Hmong owned businesses,
mhm,
because general emergency preparedness is not culturally tailored. So, like, going back to what you said, the Hmong people don't really want to ask for help
mhm,
unless that there's somebody they trust or they know. And for us being Hmong, giving help to the Hmong,
mhm,
we actually have seen so many people come out and get resources from us, which I absolutely, warms my heart to see that we're able to do that for them. In the same sense, and as you know very well, in the autism space, a lot of things are not culturally tailored.
mhm.
And so one of our partners, I know you know her, Vicky. Do you remember Vicky from FSN Family Support Network Hope?
Yes, I love
She
Vicky.
I know, she's amazing, her and Milo and Sharon and the team. So, Vicky reached out to Sandra to share a resource, pretty much,
Mhm,
I guess it's sort of like a oh gosh, I lost that word, but it's like, not a Pictionary. Well, I guess it sort of is like a Pictionary, but like a flyer with pictures and words on it called
mhm,
"Now I'm Safe," and they translated it
mhm.
to Hmong.
Oh,
For
wow.
children, yeah, it's to basically help Hmong families, with children and individuals with disabilities deal with the aftermath, of the
Mhm.
hurricane, and I can definitely share that to you if you haven't seen that yet.
Yes, please do. I think, as we know, y'all. First of all, I love that term that you just used, culturally tailored. Like, wow, like that's a new buzzword for me. I'm going to use that a lot from now on because we know that,
Yay.
right? When we talk about health equity, like we know a lot of things are not culturally tailored, right? That's a very PC word. I like that. But as we know, a lot of our families who have a loved one with a disability, they're already just trying to make it through every day, right? Just grateful that hey, we made it through the day. Let's prepare for tomorrow, and then throw in this crazy wild hurricane, right? And I've seen pictures of the destruction out there, and like unrecognizable towns, so I can't imagine the families that are impacted by it. And then we talk, like I was saying, like people don't even have hot power for a few days, right? Can't shower, can't bathe, can't cook, and so it's a big need. And what the one thing I do love about Hmong, our Hmong culture, our Hmong community is that and that everyone does pitch in, and so I love that, and I've seen that on many levels. But, I think that I'm just so grateful that more organizations like you guys and all the other collective ones coming together to partner up. I'm seeing a lot of flyers right now about all the events coming up to for like relief, right? For like FEMA relief stuff, the small business relief funds, because again, I would say for big your white counterparts, they know about all of these things. I don't want to assume they know, but they are aware that it exists, or somebody's leading them to the water, right? But for I feel like I would say for big Hmong, like we just assume like the government has given us as much as they're going to give, and yet you more like they will figure it out, and so I love that you guys are kind of pushing that information into the community. And I mean, would you say that's a big part of what you are studying and are doing as part of your public health, right? Just being able to identify what the needs are and then getting the resources there.
Yes, yes, definitely. So basically, public health is all of that.
Uh-huh.
Is making sure, yeah, is making sure that, you know, it's equitable and everybody's getting the resources that they need.
Yeah, so Brittany, I should have asked you before this, and I don't want to put you in the spot, but how fluent and how comfortable are you with your mom?
Yeah, no, I'm not that fluent.
Okay.
I know I'm
Uh-huh.
not the only one, but I will say
No,
I
you're
do
not.
understand it. I
Yeah.
can I can speak it.
Yeah.
It just doesn't sound as,
Yes.
you know.
Oh no, girl, this is me. This is I have tried to do the whole like very like gosh, professional Hmong speaking. I'm like, that's not me. I don't feel comfortable, right? So that's why we kind of went with Monglish. But I'm just curious if you can share with me and our listeners when we talk about equity, right? We talk about health equity. There's other, buzzwords and terms out there, but for bây giờ Hmong nhiều topic thoughts a lot of equity. What does that mean for them? Because that's such an important word because I think it comes from that cultural way of how we were raised to just accept what's given. You don't even realize, or you do realize that, yeah, your white counterparts because it's expected for them and they know it's there. But for Bena,
Mhm.
we just don't even realize that it's also could be available for us, right? So how would you describe that word equity or health equity even?
Right, right. So, yeah, these terms that I'm throwing out, like inequities, disparities, like
Mm-hmm.
it is very,
Yes.
they're very big words. So I could break it down. So a lot
Yes.
of people actually get inequity confused with inequality. And so this definition from
Mm-hmm.
Pan American Health Org, so inequality refers to like unequal, uneven distribution of something, while
Mm-hmm.
inequity refers to unfair and avoidable differences that are considered unjust.
Mm-hmm.
And an example of that, because they do sound very similar, but
They do.
one hot
Yeah.
example in public health I can give right now is like rural communities,
Yes.
right? So you
Mm-hmm.
can equally distribute funds, but rural communities compared to urban communities, they don't have the same amount of resources compared they don't have the
Mm-hmm.
same amount of resources. So like urban cities may have more, I guess you could say, like provider care versus like rural
Mm-hmm.
communities. And it's more
Yeah.
accessible. There's more transit versus rural communities. You probably have to drive a good amount to get to where you need to get. So there's not as much
Mhm.
accessibility, and that's an inequity.
Yeah, no, I love that example. I live in Northwest Arkansas, and so it's very rural. I can't ever say that word, but I think I just did okay on that one. And so I think about like
You
the
did great.
places like Minnesota, right, where there's like more clinics, ABA clinics, and so like families have like a variety of options to choose from. Whereas where I live, or even maybe in areas where you live there in North Carolina, there's like two clinics in the whole town of a maybe 50 to 100-mile radius, right? And so it's like the options are, are limited, right? Because that's all you've got. Is that like a pretty decent example?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's why I feel so passionately about like autism awareness, especially in the North Carolina Hmong community, because they live in more of
Mhm.
like a rural space, I feel like. Um,
Yeah.
and therefore, it's already hard enough for minorities to get the resources that they need, but add in minorities that live in rural communities, that's like basically a double whammy for them. So, yeah.
Oh, yeah, and then you add on top of that all the cultural things, right? Like, we're already trying to convince them to get buy-in, like, you should seek treatment, you should seek, resources out there, and then when they're finally, "Okay, yes, we'll do it," it's like, "Oh, also, it's kinda limited." These are your options, and so it's really hard
Right.
for that. And Brittany, I'm going to go back to the reason why I asked you back on the podcast after our live this summer. You brought up a really good point about policies, right? When it comes to ABA services. And I was like, oh my gosh, girl, that's a whole podcast episode. So here we are. We talked a little bit about, that regional to state to national level, right? And you're saying, like, well, public health, someone who in the public health realm can deal with it at all those levels and then some. And so, can you tell me? And plus, this is not my, my expertise, my area of expertise. I deal with it just on the very small. And I will share when I was working for a previous nonprofit every year. We would, and because I oversaw the two programs that got funding from the state, my boss is like, I don't care, no, she cares. She'll say there are 2 days out of the year that I really need to make sure you put on your calendar, and one of them is for Day on the Hill, right? I'm like, I don't know what that is, but all right. And we would literally drive up to the state capitol and all day just walk around the capitol and talk to all of the senators and representatives. I cannot talk to senators and
Oh,
representatives
wow.
from the whole state, but especially from our little area, and just make sure that they see us in person, they hear our stories, we talk to them, we shake their hands, we give them a little something, because otherwise they're not going to remember you. And we also take our kiddos with us, right? Our clients from the clinic and their parents come with us, and we share their stories, their success stories, and everything. And we do this every year, and we do that for about the 10 years I was there. And it's so important, in order for the people up there who are making all these budget decisions, right, to know that we are still here, we exist, we still need your funding, please vote yes, right? And so, can you share with me, like, how are these policies, right, designed to address social issues and needs? I mean, there's the state level, there's the legislative level, and then there's the, okay, cool, they voted on it now that we're going to distribute the funds. And then there's the part where when the funds are underused, what happens now? What happens next year, right? And then we look at all the funding that has ever been poured into every state. And we also know that funding per state is different. Some state, I will say, are a little bit more pro autism services than others, right? And I think I shared this little story before, and I will share it again because I feel like I saw this firsthand how important it is to, or what can happen when you have someone at that level making these decisions. So, um, you know, and I just want to go back to talk about, when our parents raise us to be doctors and lawyers, we realize that we need more than doctors and lawyers. We need people in public health. We need people, working in the psychology field. Right? We need people in every single field because we all have to work together to make the big, machine work. But sometimes we need someone at the state level to who is impacted by autism. And I share the story. I can't remember if I shared it with you, but I during one of these visits to the Hill, we met with the, see, at that time he was probably like, I don't know, just a state rep or senator, right? And he was giving my boss a really hard time. He was like, "Oh, no, 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 we're gonna cut autism funding. Like, we can't anymore. Like, it's just not something that it's not really important for us." And she was really frustrated. She's like, "Oh my gosh, like their grant for our program is like 2/3 of our budget." And I was like overseeing that program, and I'm like, "Oh my god, am I out of a job? What's going on?" Right? And then we somehow like braided funds together for the whole next year. We go back the next year, right? Because we go every year. And that same person, he got voted to be, um, he went from like a state rep to like the secretary of state. So Brittany, as you can imagine, he has a little bit more power now, and he can make a lot, more decisions. And guess what? He came up to my boss and apologized to her and said, "I'm so sorry for everything I said last year. In this last year, my sons got diagnosed with autism. I'm going to ensure that the state never loses autism funding forever or for a long time, as long as he has influence." And I thought, that's great. That's great for all of it. But what? How is that okay? Like what if that didn't happen? Would you have pulled it? And that just goes to show that, yeah, that's really what it takes, is for someone at that level to care, to be impacted by autism, to make a difference. And then once they can make those votes happen, then the money trickles down to people like you and I, right? Who work in this field, who are impacted by it, who can make these decisions to, with that funding that they're releasing into all these different grants and waivers and things that go down to the clients that we serve, right? But it's just like it drives me crazy when I think about that example, because it legit happened, and I can't believe I am even a part of that to hear about it and to live it as a practitioner, as a clinician, as a service provider. But it is very real. So when we talk about, let's raise our children to be doctors and lawyers, let's raise them to do all these other jobs too, because we all have to work together, right? Um, and so anyway, let me get off my soapbox. How do we then, how do you guys in the public health sector, how do you guys make it happen then once these decisions are made at the state level or funding is coming through? How do you go and present your case and say, hey, we need funding to go towards this? I mean, like even I remember during one of the big hurricanes, like, they were like, oh, well, FEMA funds are running out, right? Like at some point, the money dried up, right? But I mean, it's a big decision. Somebody has to make those decisions, right? And so, same with the pandemic, right? Like the public health sector had, be part of this big conversation. So, how does one contribute to these conversations about policies?
Right, right. First of all, I wanna go back to your story. That is wow.
I know, I know.
I
It
think
shocked
well,
me and it
yeah,
rocked my
thank you.
world. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Like, I actually you did not tell me that story before. So this was my first time
Okay.
hearing it, and I think
Uh-huh.
you should share it. I think it's because it brings up a very good point, which I'm sort of answering also the question that you asked me, but, um,
Yes.
lived
Okay.
experiences are not enough, and as sad
Mhm.
as that is, it's the truth. Lived experiences are very important, um, in public health, but unfortunately, it is not enough. Data is definitely king. As they
Yes.
say,
Yes,
so
absolutely.
they want research. Yeah, they want numbers. They want, at that higher level, they want to see facts. Um, but unfortunately, it does, go back to that circle of like, but we need the funding to do research. So that is an
Yes.
issue in
Yep.
itself. So you have the lived experiences, no problem. Um, but in order to really be seen and heard, we need to have we need to have data, we need to have research. But then in order to do that,
Mhm.
you have to advocate for it. You have to like apply for, research grants. You have to get sponsorships for it. And you just have to keep advocating and keep talking to your representatives and those on legislator and local political figures, and it's a big process. It's a very big, complex, messy process.
It really is. The bureaucracy of it all can really kill the spirit of, all the passion projects out there, right? And so it's a huge undertaking. And Brittany, in terms of social and health equity, then, what are some barriers that you have seen in your experience, whether with the North Carolina Hmong Women Association, and then also, how can we, as first and some of us second generation Hmong individuals or organizations like you guys, work towards shedding light and starting social movements to improve the system? Because, I would say, they're of that generation where they got here and they were just in survival mode. How blessed and how lucky are we to be that generation to say, okay, great, we survived. Thank you, mom and dad, grandma, grandpa. You got us here. We have survived. now we can thrive. But oh gosh, we're thriving, but we still see that there's some things in the system that doesn't benefit us because it just isn't built that way. What did you say? It's not culturally tailored for Hmong Americans, right? For anyone that's not white. And so, how can we shift the tides? How can we create the system that recognizes what we need? Like you said, like even just like relief for the hurricane. Like I think you guys were asking for donations for noodles, right? Like if look, if we most right reliefs and not saying that we're not grateful, but most food banks probably have kong emikan nasu, right, like like crackers, right, or soup, or beans, and canned goods, which is great, right. We're in those moments, you're grateful for anything, but like you said, it's not culturally tailored. And wow, how what a moment in our lifetime that during this very unfortunate natural disaster, that we have you guys there kind of spearheading this, hey, let's make this meaningful and helpful to big and home communities that are definitely at a loss, right? Whether how very little or how great they are impacted. Like, I think that maybe we were able to get more people to come out because they're like, oh, mga iba miya, mga inamo, inhatsu. So, I mean, that really just makes me, it just, warms my heart to know that that is available because we've never seen that before. But yeah, tell me about some of the barriers and how we can work together and or individually as own little passion projects to kind of start these social movements that you guys have already started, putting laying down the brick for.
Yeah, yeah. In terms of barriers, there's a variety of barriers and
Yeah.
a variety of disparities and inequities that we face as first and second generation Hmong Americans. Of course, everybody's going to have a little bit of a different experience, but I think overall, as a Hmong community, I still see struggles with maybe like higher education or like even like basic educations of like college success, maybe like career knowledge such as like networking, um, also just like I think the ability to communicate outside of our community, which is very
Hmm.
important, which leads to what can we do as Hmong individuals or organizations that are passionate about getting things done, while we can work
Hmm.
together and we can also work with others outside of our community. The more known and the more seen that we are, the more of a voice that we have. So, really networking with our local communities and partners and continuing to just constantly advocate for our community is what I would
Absolutely. Girl,
say.
I saw how you and Lisa did that. Yeah, I saw how you, Lisa, did that with our event in April. And I asked you that on the live. I said, how did you guys even put together? And you said it was easy. We reached out to our already established local resources, and they were more than willing to help. In fact, I think it was Vicky who was like, all these years we've been here and we never were able to connect with any Hmong organization at this level to really integrate and collaborate and put something like this together. So they have been kind of just like waiting for someone to be ready to jump on board too, right? I think if I can say this, there is a sense of xenophobia from both sides. Like there's Hmong people, they think, oh, they don't understand us. They don't know what our needs are, right? They don't understand what our Hmong needs are. And then maybe Jamaica are like, oh, the Hmong organizations that do exist, they're just very inclusive, right? They have specific needs, and we're not sure if we're a good pairing for what their needs are, or they're just not really sure how to make that connection. And so I love it. I love it takes our, first and second generation Hmong, brave Hmong, individuals like you who are kind of like, you know what, like you said, I have this access to this this knowledge, this information that when you go about it in this way, you're more likely to get the support, right? And the resources that are already established, and we don't have to start from the ground up. And that's definitely the way to go. And I saw that in action with you guys. So yeah, that's a really great example. I don't think that we do that enough, and I love seeing that happening there. And perhaps that will, catch on, and we'll be more willing to be open to all our community resources.
Yes, definitely. It takes that first awkward conversation. Um, say, "Hey, I want to have a conversation with you." And yeah, it can
Hmm.
be awkward at first, but
Yeah.
when it comes down to it, we're all human and we all just want uh, to feel like we matter. And I think that's what really helps, get us through as
Yeah.
a community
I
as a
mean, I
whole.
love it, and just like you said, Vicky reached out, was like, "Hey, there's this thing we're doing, right?" And sharing it with you guys, so you guys can then now share it with your Hmong community. So, I mean, it's all about those connections and networking. So back to autism, I think one of the biggest thing that I want to share with big Hmong families is there's funding available. I think a lot of parents kind of get bogged down by how am I going to be able to afford that? Like you have to let them in your, potty training for, 10 years. How are we going to afford diapers or pull ups to little lala, right? Or if let them in your, I see a lot of parents asking, go to me, you get care from Beta J, Beijing most South Bay. We have all kinds of locks, but they still run away. Your state, if you get on the right waiver, they can pay for fencing, right? They can pay for GPS tracking devices, right? Whatever you need, all these things for your child's safety is covered under these waivers. And we talk about, well, how does one get a waiver? Sharon works at the state level, and I was telling her, I was like, yeah, talking to some of the parents there at the event, I was like, some states the waiver is like 2 years long, and she's like, oh, it's 10. I was like, 10? Oh my God, that's a whole decade, like and it startles you because you're like, how am I ever going to get my kiddo on this waiver, and we have to wait 10 years to get services or to get funding from it? And it's like, yes, put them on right now. If they are, whether they right now, they just got their diagnosis, they're 3, get them on the waiver. Because the one thing that I want to make sure your home parents, well, có autism diagnosis, you always có autism diagnosis. So cái khẩu waiver, giống như là有8个头女老，但是头女老了，但女老你个你控制, like medical equipment, or some of our kids have those very automatic sensory needs, right? So they might need like a medical grade swing in their house, or in their backyard, or whatever it is, um, as they get older, their needs change, and they get bigger. They need more heavy duty medical grade equipment, right? So you still decide that, oh gosh, how are we going to afford that? No, there's waivers and funding out there, but it's up to you to do the work to go get that funding. And so, we talk again about like policies, and I want to share that video waivers that they have now, every single one of them in Fantasia states. The reason why we have it is because many, many years ago, maybe 10, 20 years ago, like your parents, like the big bây giờ tu là khó xí nhà mù tu là it's hard, it costs a lot
Mhm.
of money to họ. Here's the thing about autism, it does not discriminate, you know you muốn nhầm tông b리 cha, you dân trên b리 cha, or whatever, it does not discriminate. So it's a lifelong diagnosis. It's a lifelong needs for any kind of support. So the states recognizing that, okay, right? Especially the thing is, just because it exists today, this year, this fiscal year, does not guarantee that it will exist next year, next 5 years, 10 years, 50 years. In your law, right? So how can we change that, right? How can we ensure that the money is there? How can we um, continue to parent your child knowing that your state has your best interest, your child's best interest, right? And so we rely on people like you, Brittany, who are doing these studies, who are making sure that, communities are being looked after, taken care of, right? So pertaining to autism, what can you share with bigger listeners about currency policy changes that will impact families? Because you shared one with me and I was like, I didn't know that. we all need to know this. And then also, how can parents advocate for their child's future's needs if these policies are not kept in place or they do not evolve to meet the needs of this growing community of individuals with an autism diagnosis? And I just saw some news thing the other day about like the Somali community in Minnesota. There's such a huge increase in autism diagnosis, and of course we know that it's probably related to all of the chemical warfare that they were, unfortunately, um, exposed to, right? But then same with Big Hmong, right? It's there, if we were to trace it, if we had the funding, the interest, the research to go look into more into the numbers in our Hmong community, we would probably see that the numbers are just as high as the national numbers for Asians, right? Because we get clumped to do the Asian numbers, so it's like 1 in 16. But if we looked at our Hmong, communities, and I collated some numbers, Brittany. Oh yeah, you were there. You were there for my presentation. I collated some numbers and projected that I think in North Carolina there's like roughly 200 kiddos, 250 kiddos, on the spectrum, right? And it kind of just trickles down of just basic math, whatever, from all the information that we actually did have that does exist. But yeah, a lot of questions, but just share with me like parents don't think about policies. They're just kind of trying, like I said, trying to make it from today to tomorrow. But you realize that, as ka tuwing yung law, you need, kayo ni niya muto ni dashi, after 18, possibly, we don't know, right? It's hard to predict, but, the government, they will, but you have to know that there are policies in place to protect you guys and support you. But how can you, as someone who isn't, aware or involved, how can you still be part of this change?
Yes, there's a lot of ways that you can be involved and that you can advocate. And I am just huge on community involvement in your local community. That is probably one of the easiest ways to start. So organizations that really champion these type of policies, fighting for um, just like more resources and equality for our autism community. And for example, like the local county that I'm in is
Hmm.
starting their
Hmm.
community health assessment.
Yeah.
And they are looking for people to be on their community steering committee, which
Yeah.
they're people who help guide that assessment. And I, being a public health professional, I felt that,
Hmm.
it was like a responsibility and a passion to get involved locally because I
Hmm.
am the voice for the Southeast Asians that live here
Yeah.
in this city, in my city, and in
Hmm.
my county. Um, and so that's why I think it's so important to get involved locally. You know, you are your child's advocate,
Hmm.
and um, together, being together, it just makes your voice stronger and louder when you're with other people who are sharing the same cause as you.
Absolutely. And I think something you said earlier too is that realizing that other people are just as much in need of what you might need too, right? And together, with our voices together, we are definitely louder, able to do a lot more. And I think some of the most passionate people that I've taken to the hill with me are those parents, right? Who were able to take some time off and actually brought their kiddos with us. And we would bring a staff for their kiddo because, as we know, right, it's all about supports. And so we bring their kiddo, bring a staff and the parent. And those were the parents who made the most impact and most memorable, so like they're not going to remember me, like as a staff member there talking about numbers and stuff, but they're going to remember that family story who said, because of this funding, our kid was able to go to the social skills group and learn how to make friends, right? Because we need that. That is a skill that he can have for the rest of his life. Or and one of the other things that we taught was, um, how to like budget, and we're teaching these teenagers with autism how to budget. And this is not something they were getting at school, and they could come and we can have those lessons. And so these are things that parents can share with us, the decision makers. So yeah, it definitely, I think parents need to realize that, your voice is more important, right, than the professionals, the service providers, because the people that get to make these decisions, they want to hear you. They want to know that you exist. They want to hear your daily stories about they want to hear about the challenges, and then they also want to hear about the victories, and how that funding that they approved was able to make your life better, and why they need to keep giving that money to you. You know what I mean? So that's really important. And I really appreciate you shedding light on that, just how important it is to continue to, make our voices heard, and to seek those opportunities to advocate. And again, it's not so much like, even if you feel like, I'm so busy, I can't do it on that great big level, just do it in your local community. There's always opportunities, right? So thank you for sharing that example. I loved it.
Yes, of course, and thank you for sharing your experiences. I love hearing it.
Yes, I mean, again, that wild story. I had to hear that and live through that to understand that, um, you know, unfortunately for some of us, um, we need to kind of know people in those places to make those decisions, because then the masses can benefit. And it's kind of unfortunate that that's how the world currently works. But then we also have to know that, even for us who are not in those big chairs with those big decisions to make, we can still contribute in our own ways too. And that's just kind of, again, I guess, the big beauty of the whole public health realm is that we all are impacted by. We all can help drive the decisions that are made. So yeah, thank you for shedding light on that field. That is a field that I have not really, I don't know very much about, but when you brought it up, I was like, ooh, I love to talk about policies and procedures, because it is a big part of service, for services, right? Autism services. We cannot take it for granted that just because, this service exists today, that it's going to exist forever. I mean, I know even for ABA, right? Like we're
Right.
constantly like, kind of like on our toes with like insurance and Medicaid, right? Because anything can change. And so, like you said too, like it takes money to make research happen, and when research happens, then projects can happen to benefit people. But how do we know that it needs to happen if we don't have the money to make to make the research happen? So
Right.
it's this really big cyclical thing, and we have to work together, right? And
Mhm.
again, Brittany, I just appreciate everything that you do and everything that the North Carolina Hmong Women's Association does for, the state of North Carolina and for women. And oh yeah, I saw that you guys have a thing coming up in October for, Hmong women and girls. Is that still happening?
Yes, it is
Yes.
still happening. Thankfully, the event venue that we rented out is okay, marked
Oh,
safe
good.
from the hurricane, so
Yeah.
it is still gonna happen.
Yes, thank you guys so much for, giving some, attention and light to big Hmong women and girls who have been doing amazing things. And I think something that Cinder and I talk about is when we were growing up, right? But just recounting our experiences as, young teenagers and, in high school, you always kind of go, I wish there was someone, a role model out there that could show me what it's like to lead Hmong women, right? Be raised as Hmong women. Um, I think it's one of those things like you have to be there to understand. You have to be Hmong to understand. We really fought against the odds because, and our generation was a really interesting, weird one where we were kind of still had parents who were very traditional, but who were kind of like trying to help us into being more modern. And so there's a lot of, imbalance there. But I look at Sandra and what she's doing. I'm like, thank you for being the role models that we needed growing up, right? I'm so proud of what you guys are doing there in North Carolina, and inspiring all the little girls there and all the other Hmong women there to know that, with our collective voices, we can do anything and we can do everything. So thank you, Brittany, so much for your part. And I look forward to just, cheering you guys on as you guys, really change the future for Hmong women, and not just in North Carolina, but here in Arkansas as well.
Thank you, and thank you for all you do. We appreciate you.
Oh, thank you so much. All right, we'll chat soon.
Alright, bye.